Okay. So, um, I was sharing with Karen. So I get everything you're saying intellectually.
Yes.
I mean, I totally believe and get that we're all a bunch of cells and atoms bouncing around, and everything that looks solid really isn't. I mean, I get all of that, and I'm in my head.
Yes. I'm glad you notice. That's the first step, is to notice that you're really just getting it conceptually, which is helpful, to get it conceptually. But I think the wonderful thing about meditation is that you can actually get it in your body. You can actually get it through observing your breath in your body, how things are changing, and observing your mind, the way thoughts come up and they seem so real, and then you notice that you're thinking, and suddenly the thought just falls apart. You know, the thoughts create, this whole reality. I've been noticing this with political thoughts. I'll say this because I suspect many of you are in the same spot. That, like, the thoughts will create a whole mood out of nowhere of, fear or distress or something. And it's easy to think that that's because you're tied in with reality. But in fact, it's what the mind is thinking right now. It has that, it's so concrete that the mind thinks something, and then this whole emotional experience arises based on the perceptions that the thought created. And all this seems very, very real to us. But as we practice, it's possible to see, oh, that was a thought. Thoughts are potentially true, but not everything that shows up in our head is true. Have you noticed that? It's one of the incredibly valuable things about meditating and watching what shows up in your mind is you start to notice things show up in your mind that are somewhat crazy, delusional, inaccurate. And so you hold thoughts differently. So that's not just in your head. That's actual contemplation. That's actually seeing the way things are moment to moment. And that's the skill that we're developing when we meditate. And so you may at some point just notice that your hands are vibrating. You may have the thought in your head that we're all just atoms and we're really composed of nothing. But you can actually experience that directly just by paying attention to the touch sensations in your hands. I like the hands because they're very sensitive, and there's a lot of there, and it's easy to go into a sensation and go deeper and see what it is. You could be doing that right now while I talk. And lo and behold, that sort of vibrating emptiness, it's right there in your experience. It's not necessarily just in the thought of atoms, and everything you're told about science is true of the hands. It's right there in your experience in a different way. So this is an encouragement to, keep meditating. Keep meditating. And keep moving past the conceptual mind. We're so trained to operate from the conceptual mind in this culture. And yet, reality lies beyond it. Like direct contact with things as they are, as they arise and pass. It's not just a thought, it's a direct experience.
Is it getting to a place where you're beyond language and words?
In some
You
sense,
see how I'm
yes.
still trying to wrap my thinking mind
Yeah,
around all of this.
yeah. I mean, every time you notice a thought as a thought, you are beyond words. Each time when you meditate and a thought comes up and you're lost in a thought, and then suddenly you notice, oh, thinking, there's a moment where there's no words. And maybe the words come in right away after that. But there are these spaces that are beyond words already in your experience. I'm sure there is. And if you meditate more, and especially if you do it intensively, if you go off on an intensive silent retreat where you stop talking, stop writing, stop communicating in that way, the verbal part of your mind gets weaker. And these sort of periods of not thinking and being beyond words, they get longer. They get more stable. You begin to see like who you are beyond all these words. So that's one of the values of doing an intensive silent meditation retreat, is that it gives you the support to let go of words even more. I love him. I love silence, you know. And there's a funny way when you're in silence, you actually feel closer to people sometimes than when you're talking. The yak, 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 yak. Sometimes you actually, it's like you take them in on a different level, a level without words. We're doing that anyway, you know, as you look at me and I look at you. We're kind of taking each other in on all different levels. And it's partly why I like being in person with people, because there's a whole lot more information coming in than there is on Zoom. But nonetheless, even on Zoom, the like tone of voice, the expressions, everything, it's like it's communicating. And as words fall away, there can be a kind of closeness around that. Or the way you communicate with animals. You know, our dog barks, so she has a sort of words. Um, but she just communicates all over the place without words. You know. All right, Linda, does that kind of give you a little idea there? Yeah. It's huge to get beyond concepts, beyond the thinking mind. So let's see, Lisa. You unmuted. Go ahead and
So
speak.
I have been working on the same sorts of things. When I sit to meditate, I usually am, I know that I shouldn't say this, but I'm more successful in the morning. Um,
No, I know what you mean.
you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm,
you're more
it's
alert.
easier for me to get to that space. But one of the things that I've been doing is, um, I've been using the word occupy. So I say, I tell myself in the body scan to occupy my jaw, to occupy, and
Oh,
it centers me. But I've also been trying to do a walking meditation of a kind. I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but I know, but being
yeah,
outside, if I'm outside, there's this, I can occupy the ground in a way that's does that same thing that you were talking about tonight, where everything seems to slip away. And I do get the sense of um, this moment that is without a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Is without a lot of value assigned to it, just itself, right?
right.
I can do that now with listening to birds or whatever. But anyway, the question I have for you
By the
is,
way, I just want to say you're doing walking meditation the way it should be done. It doesn't matter the technique. What you've just said tells me that it's really a valuable practice for you. And
okay.
listening to birds.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that, I was going to ask about a walking meditation. I've been doing this. I'll go out on the marsh early in the morning. Um, and I find that that's a really great space to be really here and now, for me, and, if I stop, if I sit down for a moment, after that kind of a short walking experience, it's amazing how much, I don't want to say this again, but how much better I am at sort of draining myself of all the stuff that's been clouding my experience.
Mm.
So, so I've never been to like a weekend retreat or anything like that, but I want to just ask the question about like, so if I do that, what happens? And, you know, where should I go to do more of that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So there are two retreat centers actually very close by here that people come to from all over the world. At least Inside Meditation Society in Barrie, I know they come from all over to practice there. The one in Shelburne, because that style of Vipassana has locations all over the world, people don't necessarily need to travel to Shelburne to do it. But so there's a meditation in Shelburne, and there's the meditation center in Barrie. Inside Meditation Society are two excellent places to do an intensive silent retreat. They're different in flavor. Their practices are a little different, but they're both good. They're both good venues, and we'll be doing a non-residential retreat in the winter. I sent out an announcement about that recently. That's a little bit different. You don't quite have the same support for silence because you go home at night, and you may have a spouse or children or that you'll talk to, and it's a way to integrate the silence you have during the day with your life as it actually is normally, interacting with people. So it serves a little bit different purpose. But even in a weekend, you find you can drop into something that feels different than your normal consciousness. And, those sort of shifts that you notice when you go outside and you listen to the birds and you go to a certain place that is easy for you to silence the mind. Those sorts of things can also happen on a retreat. There's a supportive environment for that. And normally retreat centers are out in nature, in beautiful places. They're in beautiful, quiet places generally. There is something to be said for meditating in noisy, obnoxious places, but that's not normally where retreat centers are. And so that enhances too. You have access to nature, and nature, it's such a funny word. Everything is nature. We're nature. But you go out and the non-human world, the non-built world, however we're going to talk about it, boy, it just talks to us to all different levels of our being beyond our enculturation in human kind of culture. And it's so valuable that way, the way that our bodies respond to the scent of the trees and the scent of the earth and the kinds of sounds that we're likely to hear there. And all of that has a huge influence on us. And I think it's easier to reach for the wordless side to our being when we're there, And, plants don't have egos. I don't know what animals have, but there's not much of one there either. And it doesn't arouse that in us, which is so easily diluted, by the things that are valuable in society, the things that other people care about. We walk out of that when we kind of walk out of the human world into the forest. And it's why the forest is such a powerful support for this kind of awakening. So what else can I say about it? Intensive silent retreats? They magnify what's inside of you. Even a short retreat like we'll do in the winter can magnify what's actually in there, so that you can hear it, you can see it. That's not always pleasant. In fact, initially it can be quite unpleasant to see what's inside of you, what you carry around, kind of undigested, undealt with inside of you. But often people move through that and come to deeper places of stillness and insight. And, I think most people by the end of the retreat understand that the difficulty of it was worth it and it was necessary. That there's really no way to open the heart without in some way opening to its sorrow, some way opening to its pain. You can't do an end run around that. So I will say that intensive silent retreats can be difficult. And one of the things that's difficult is just meditating that much is kind of hard on the body. It gets stiff. And it tends to amplify the aches and pains in the body too, as you drop into the body that much. So, there's a lot to say about that's unpleasant about doing an intensive silent retreat, but I just have found them to be so helpful. And I encourage people to do them. If you do a residential retreat, do something longer, around a week or a little more, 7 to 10 days. It's the case that the first 3 days are the hardest, and it's really hard to settle. And after the first 3 days, you settle and you start to get the payoff, shall we say, of the retreat. And if you do just a short weekend, and it's residential, because the residential is a lot tighter container than what we do non-residentially, you can find, that you deal with more of the hindrances, and that can make it more unpleasant. Anybody who's drawn to it to do an intensive silent retreat, it will teach you things that I can't really in these classes, not because I couldn't say it, not because I can't teach it verbally, but there's something about having people go into deeper states of consciousness. And then what you say registers in a different way. Really does. In fact, I remember once, maybe more than once, I've tried, for various reasons, trying to talk about the things I talk about in a group that hasn't meditated. And I vowed that I'm not going to really talk about the Dharma unless I sit with people for at least 15 minutes, if not a half an hour. Because there's a shift in consciousness that allows people to really receive what I have to say and hear where it's coming from. And those times when I've just kind of launched into some sort of situation where I was brought into a group and people wanted me to tell them about Buddhism or tell them about meditation or whatever without the experience of it, I found that I was just like dealing with people's opinions. Everybody's opinions, everybody's way they'd conceptually put the world together differently than what I was saying. And it was, that can be stimulating on some level, but also kind of worthless if what you're actually trying to give people is a real experience of what these words mean. The Dharma, it only becomes valuable when you see the experiences to which the words refer. You really enter into them. And you can't do that solely conceptually. So even just 30 minutes of meditation with a group of people I've never seen before, who maybe have never meditated before, or even 20 minutes of meditation. Probably if they've never meditated before, I might start with 20 minutes. They've shifted enough to hear more of what I have to say. So retreats allow you to hear in a deeper way, hear the Dharma in a deeper way. And sometimes things that conceptually are so simple, when the mind is kind of out in the world and very quick, they just sound like, okay, like everything's impermanent. So what? I get that. But then there's the moment where you have a thought and you watch it dissolve and you're suddenly like dumbstruck by the reality of what the mind does. It touches your heart in a deeper way, that thoughts are impermanent. or you actually stand and you watch the sun go down, which I've done many times at Insight Meditation Society, because the front of the building faces the setting sun. It faces, depending on the time of year, of course, it faces west. And it can be a completely different experience, because the moments are just so much more real, and they're touching a heart that's so much more open. And that's just part of that experience. I sometimes think, like, when I'm doing intensive silent retreats, I'm really living. This is real living. The rest is kind of very superficial. That's not entirely true. I don't want to put them up on a pedestal that way, because I've also seen that, there's some people who kind of become retreat junkies and can't practice outside of them. And that's actually not the point either. And when you find the deathless, when you find the place of stillness that you are, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're silent. It doesn't matter if you're in, Manhattan and it's loud and there's people everywhere, moving everywhere, or you're in a loud dance party. It doesn't kind of matter. And that's important to discover too. To not be, as my teacher Larry Rosenberg would say, a hothouse plant. You don't want to become a hothouse plant. You have to move out of the hothouse. The hothouse can be very helpful when you're a tender young seedling to sprout and get going. But at some point, you do need to move out of the hothouse. But for most of us here, I think you could spend some time in the hothouse. That would really nurture your practice. All right. Anything else, Lisa?
No, but just what you just said just really strikes me, because this has been such a process for me, and I feel like I don't want to say ready to do something new, like the retreat. I'm not ready for Manhattan yet, but maybe I'll get there, And I think that it makes me excited to keep going,
Yeah. Great. The Thai forest meditation teacher Ajahn Chah had said that when he noticed that monks were at a certain place doing really well in their practice in the forest, and he saw that they really liked the forest, he would send them to a monastery in Bangkok. I don't know if you've been to Bangkok. It is the loudest. Well, it might not be as loud. I'm told the tuk-tuks that were like these two-cylinder gas engines are being replaced by electric more and more. And maybe it's not this kind of roar every time the light changes of these tuk-tuks going. But I haven't been in Bangkok in a long time. So, but it's pure chaos. It's a big city. And because he didn't want his monks to assume that awakening was something that belonged in the forest. Awakening can be anywhere, And so he shook them out. All right. Anyone else like to speak? Tanis. You have to unmute yourself, Tanis.
There we go, I think.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I raised my hand okay, but forgot that. Speaking of silence, the power of silence, I've some of you have heard this before, but I have a granddaughter, actually the only grandchild I have, who is 4 years old and is non-verbal and neurodiverse autistic. we didn't see that really, which is typical, until she was about a year and a half. And then things changed. But my question really is, it's been quite a long while dealing with this, but dealing with her. And she's very wonderful and very active, extremely active, but she speaks no words. She makes sounds constantly, different sounds, and just has really exciting moments and is pretty happy, I would say, with some exclusions. But my question, there's something that, Mark, that as time has gone on, I find the experience with her, the times with her, which are quite brief because she doesn't have any attention span, and she goes running off and all this. And I try to catch those times. I sort of watch for them. And usually when she's a little tired, and get down to her level so I can just look at her. And I find that the experience of just being with her in a very one-to-one way. And she does like being around people now. She didn't used to, but that's been a huge growth. Anyway, and I'm a person who just talks a lot, as you might guess, who is not still a lot. But this child is, I would say, she's profound. I look at her face, and she more and more studies my face. And she just looks into me. And it's so deep that, and when I'm with her in those moments, all I experience is that experience. It's given me that feeling of just total presence. And certainly with my own children, I had, a lot, I had a lot of that kind of thing, but this is different. And with someone who doesn't even attempt to talk.
Yeah.
And it's very natural to just be with her and not even think about how you're talking. You just, if you have to talk, and tell her. So she understands clearly a lot. But anyway, so in some ways, this discussion has helped me with that because this is more late. I just think it's really profound.
Yes, it is.
It puzzles me.
Yeah, it is puzzling. And I'm so
And
glad that you've noticed that she can look at you from a deep place of presence, and that draws you in to a deep place of presence. How
Mhm.
powerful. Yeah.
You're right.
I noticed somebody put in the chat that there are these tapes you may have heard of, the telepathy tapes, which is a study of non-speaking autistic children and their mental capacities, which are astonishing if you're
Oh,
actually open to looking to what they do besides speak. And so, anyway, I've listened to them. I found them fascinating.
telepathy tapes.
Yeah, the telepathy tapes, they're called. It's a podcast. So you can get that wherever podcasts are gotten. And
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
you might
oh.
find it interesting since,
I'm far enough along with all of this that I can read about autism and all that. At first, I was so full of grief. The whole family was. We were
right.
so filled with grief that we didn't want to learn anything. But,
Yeah.
it's not that I don't have grief still, but it's just now there's more of an interest in finding out more. So
Great.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
All right. Thanks for speaking about this, Tanis. It's a profound journey that you're going through with this child, and
it
I really
is.
honor what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And we're at the end of our time here for this particular course. I hope to see you guys in the next one. But if I don't, be well and take care. And if there's any last thing, yeah, just be well. I just wish you all well in your lives and in your practice.